The sweltering heat of the American summer beat down mercilessly on every roof, pushing its way through the blinds of the cramped guest room. On the second morning after my wedding and the exhausting weekend-long celebration, I woke up with my entire body aching. The grueling toll of entertaining guests, dancing, and standing with a forced smile for hours on end in a heavy wedding dress still held my muscles in a tight grip. I took a deep breath, intending to grab a quick coffee and head out to run some errands before we officially moved into our new $1.5 million townhouse in Lincoln Park next week. But standing in the middle of the living room was Brianna, my new sister-in-law, with her arms crossed and a face full of defiance. Brianna was 22. She had just graduated with a useless degree but outright refused to get a job. She sat at home all day, leeching off her parents and her brother. But brutal reality slapped me in the face the moment I stepped out of the bedroom. The once immaculate living room looked like the aftermath of a wild frat party. Empty hard seltzer cans, sticky puddles of spilled liquor, and half-eaten pizza boxes littered the expensive Persian rug. The stench of stale beer and a faint whiff of vomit near the sofa made my stomach turn. Sprawled across the sectional were Brianna and two of her equally hungover friends. Seeing me walk out, Brianna lifted her chin. There wasn't a shred of shame on her face. "Oh, good. You're up," she whined, massaging her temples and pointing toward the kitchen. "We had a little after-party last night. Grab some trash bags and clean up this mess. Oh, and my friends are starving. Make us some of your avocado toast and brew a pot of fresh coffee. But use the good beans from the local roaster, not the cheap grocery store crap." I froze for a few seconds, wondering if I had misheard her. I, a VP of marketing who managed dozens of employees, accustomed to the pressure of quarterly corporate goals and multi-million-dollar contracts, was taking orders from an entitled brat to clean up her drunken mess on my second day in my husband's family home. I took a deep breath, trying to remain as calm and polite as possible. Looking straight into Brianna's eyes, I spoke slowly but firmly. "Brianna, I entered this family as a wife, not a hired maid. I go to work and contribute financially, just like your brother, Kevin. If you and your friends throw a party, you clean up after yourselves. I'm not scrubbing vomit out of the rug, and I'm certainly not your personal chef." At that moment, my mother-in-law, Patricia, walked out of the kitchen. She was wearing an immaculate pastel blouse. Her face displayed that trademark suburban hypocrisy, the fake, syrupy Southern hospitality that masked deep judgment. Seeing the tension between us, she didn't utter a single word of reprimand to her biological daughter. Instead, she walked over, patted my shoulder, and spoke in a painfully sweet, passive-aggressive tone. "Oh, let it go, sweetie," Patricia whispered. "Your sister is still in her party phase and isn't feeling well today. You're a new member of the family. Set a good example. Just grab a mop, do a quick wipe down, and throw something together for them to eat so we can be done with it. Spoil her a little to keep the peace in the house. Family takes care of family." Patricia's blatant favoritism pushed my frustration to its absolute limit. The injustice was glaring. Brianna was an adult. She wasn't a child who needed to be coddled over such absurd demands. I gently removed my mother-in-law's hand from my shoulder, keeping my tone measured but unwavering. "Patricia, I respect how you run your house, but right is right. If I clean up Brianna's drunken mess today, then tomorrow, the day after, and for the rest of my life, playing the unpaid maid will become my job. I work a demanding corporate job. I need rest, too. Brianna is an adult. She needs to take responsibility for her own actions." Hearing my words, the fake, sweet smile vanished from Patricia's lips. Her face darkened, and a distinct look of contempt appeared in her eyes. She looked me up and down, turned on her heel, and started muttering under her breath about mouthy modern feminists who have no respect for their elders. The morning air, already suffocating from the heat, became even more oppressive, signaling a massive storm about to strike the house. My mother-in-law's muttering quickly reached the ears of Frank. My father-in-law, who was drinking his black coffee at the dining table, immediately jumped to his feet. He was a man in his 60s with a hulking build and a face that constantly radiated hostility. He had spent his entire life as a shift manager at a large manufacturing plant. He was used to barking orders and bending others to his iron will. His deep-rooted chauvinism made him view the women in his home as subordinates, meant to serve and obey. Frank marched toward me with heavy steps. His eyes were bloodshot, and his thick, calloused finger pointed directly at my face. His yell echoed through the living room like thunder. "What did you just say?" he roared. "Under my roof. You will show respect. You will not disrespect my family and act like you run this place just because you make a little money. What did my daughter say that gives you the right to talk back? You've only been here 2 days, and you're already acting like a spoiled princess who won't lift a finger. Before I could even open my mouth to explain, I felt a cold rush of air against my face. Smack. A deafening slap struck my left cheek. The force of the blow, delivered by a man accustomed to decades of manual labor, was so immense that I stumbled, my ears ringing. Stars exploded before my eyes. A burning pain spread across my face, and I tasted the metallic tang of blood seeping from the corner of my mouth. A terrifying silence fell over the entire room. Brianna covered her mouth with her hand and stepped back. Patricia stood frozen, though she couldn't hide a glint of satisfaction on her face. Frank puffed out his chest and stood with his hands on his hips, posing as the absolute patriarch who had just enforced his ruthless authority. He waited for me to cry, to break down, to start apologizing. But I didn't cry. Not a single tear fell. An extreme surge of resentment morphed into a cold, terrifying strength that rolled down my spine. I wiped the blood from the corner of my mouth, pulling my iPhone from my pajama pocket. Without taking my eyes off Frank, I tapped 3 digits on the screen. 911. Seeing the emergency number light up the screen, the smug look on Frank's face vanished. It was replaced by sheer panic and violent rage. "You little bitch, give me that phone," he roared, lunging forward with his heavy hands outstretched to grab me and strike again. My survival instinct kicked in. I backed up hastily into the open kitchen until my spine hit the granite countertop. My hand desperately reached behind me, grabbing the first thing it touched on the wooden knife block. A heavy, gleaming 8-inch steel chef's knife. As Frank crossed the threshold of the kitchen, I raised the blade, pointing it directly at his chest. "If you take one more step, I swear to God I will use it," I hissed, my voice echoing with an icy determination that stopped him dead in his tracks. Frank slammed on the brakes, his heavy boots skidding against the hardwood floor. His arrogant, flushed face went completely pale. He raised his hands in the air and backed away, terrified of the deadly consequences of his own violence. Patricia shrieked, cowering and clutching the arm of her trembling daughter. Their arrogance and patriarchy had been completely crushed by my fierce, uncompromising self-defense. Ignoring their terror, I turned around and walked with measured steps back to the guest bedroom, slamming the door behind me. The dry click of the lock echoed, cutting me off from the suffocating, toxic world outside. As soon as the door closed, I slid down to the floor, leaning my back against the wall. My heart was pounding relentlessly, my hands still shaking from the adrenaline. Just then, Kevin, the husband I had entrusted my future to a mere 2 days ago, clumsily crawled out of the tangled bedsheets. The deafening noise in the living room and the aggressive slam of the door had finally ripped him from his deep sleep. Kevin rubbed his eyes, yawned loudly, and looked at me groggily. He was a software developer who spent his days glued to 2 monitors. He was a nice guy, but incredibly passive, cowardly, and terrified of any conflict. He slowly got out of bed, squinting as he registered my swollen, red face with a massive handprint and the fresh blood on my lip. But instead of rushing to hug me, asking what happened, or checking if I was okay, Kevin started looking frantically at the door. He pressed his ear to the wood, listening to the eerie silence outside, and then turned to me with an accusing look. Frowning in annoyance, he lowered his voice. "What kind of circus did you just pull out there?" As soon as I opened my eyes, I heard screaming. "My mom said you pulled a knife on my dad when he was just trying to calm you down. Why are you suddenly threatening everyone? What if the neighbors called the cops?" His disappointment was like a bucket of ice water poured over the fire of resentment in my heart, extinguishing whatever leftover hope I had for this marriage. I stood up abruptly. I stepped into Kevin's personal space and forced him to look directly at the swollen bruise on my face. I growled, every word piercing his cowardice. "Open your eyes and look. Your father did this to me because I refused to be your spoiled little sister's personal maid and clean up the vomit from her frat party. Your mother allowed it, and your father hit me so hard I saw stars. Tell me, Kevin, was Frank right or wrong to hit me?" Kevin looked spooked. His eyes darted around, avoiding my gaze. He scratched the back of his neck, his hands trembling, unsure of what to do. After a moment of stuttering, he started spewing excuses that made me physically sick. "You have to understand my dad," he pleaded weakly. "He's old school, and lately he loses his patience easily. You should have just shown him respect. If you had just played nice to defuse the situation, why would he have hit you? We are husband and wife. You need to learn to pick your battles. Compromise builds peace. How am I supposed to look my parents in the eye now, after your aggressive reaction? That phrase, compromise builds peace, falling from Kevin's lips, was the final blow that severed the fragile thread of affection between us. A highly educated man with a senior developer's salary, yet clinging to such archaic views, tolerating domestic violence, and expecting his wife to endure the trampling of her dignity just so he wouldn't be inconvenienced. He was only afraid of family drama. He didn't care at all about the physical and psychological trauma of the woman he supposedly loved. Watching him shrink in fear of his own parents, I smiled bitterly, a bitter smile at my own stupidity for ignoring all the red flags. Without a word of objection, I turned around, pulled my suitcase from the corner of the room, and calmly unzipped it. I gathered all my clothes, toiletries, and my laptop, stuffing them inside. Every item was packed with a determination that reflected the hardening resolve in my mind. This marriage, from the moment that slap landed and my husband chose to look away, was officially dead. I zipped the suitcase shut with a loud sound that tore through the silence of the room. The sound of the wheels rolling across the hardwood floor was cold and absolute. Seeing that I was actually leaving, Kevin panicked. He reached out to grab the handle of the suitcase, but his gesture was weak and lacked conviction. He pleaded submissively, "Alice, please don't blow this out of proportion. Packing your bags and going back to your parents on the second day after our wedding is going to make us a laughingstock. Just stay in the room and put some ice on your face. I'll go talk to my dad. I'm begging you." I pushed Kevin's hand away. There was nothing but absolute contempt in my gaze. I answered clearly, "People will laugh at you, Kevin. Not me. I have a career, financial independence, and self-respect. There is no reason in the world why I should hide in this room and be a punching bag for your abusive father. Get out of my way." I unlocked the bedroom door and walked out into the living room with my head held high. Frank was sitting in an armchair, his face still flushed with the remnants of rage. Seeing me dragging my luggage, he shouted, "If you're so tough, then get the hell out of my house. And once you walk out, don't come crawling back crying, begging me to let you in. This family doesn't tolerate lunatics who threaten their in-laws with weapons." Patricia and Brianna stood huddled by the kitchen island, glaring at me with venomous eyes with every step I took. Ignoring their toxic energy, I walked straight out the front door and ordered an Uber. 15 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up to the curb. I loaded my suitcase, slammed the door, and left behind that suffocating house and the strangers who called themselves a family. The Uber glided smoothly along the Chicago streets, heat waves rippling over the asphalt. Sitting in the back seat and watching the passing strip malls, my adrenaline finally crashed. All the shock, betrayal, and humiliation I had bottled up suddenly burst out of me. Tears streamed down my cheeks, which still throbbed with burning pain. When the car pulled up to my parents' house in a quiet, affluent subdivision in Naperville, I wiped my tears, took a deep breath, and dragged my suitcase up the driveway. My mom, Mary, a retired nurse, was watering the geraniums out front. Seeing me get out of the Uber with my luggage, she dropped the garden hose and ran over in a panic. "Alice, honey, what are you doing here? What happened to your face?" "Oh my God, it's all swollen," she cried. I threw my arms around my mom's neck and sobbed loudly like a little child. My crying startled my dad, Richard, a retired high school principal, who was reading the morning paper on the porch. He ran down the steps, his face transitioning from confusion to absolute horror. After calming down inside, I sat on their living room sofa with an ice pack and recounted every single detail. From Brianna demanding I be her personal maid, through Patricia's toxic enabling, Frank's brutal slap, all the way to Kevin's cowardly reaction. Hearing the story, my dad flew into such a rage that he slammed his fist onto the coffee table. He was a man who had spent his life shaping young minds, lived with integrity, and loved me unconditionally. He growled, "Your mother and I cherished and protected you your whole life. We never raised a hand to you, and that brute dared to strike you? Kevin is a spineless coward. I fully support your decision to annul this marriage or get a divorce immediately. There will be no couples counseling, no making up. My daughter does not belong in a house of abusers." My mom held my shoulders, crying tears of fury and despair over me. Meanwhile, my iPhone buzzed endlessly on the side table. The screen showed dozens of missed calls and text messages from Kevin. The texts were full of empty apologies interspersed with sentences defending his family, begging me to come back so we wouldn't embarrass the family right after the wedding. I scrolled through the messages with immense disgust and flipped my phone to Do Not Disturb. Whatever brief marital affection had tied us together was completely and irreversibly dead. My resolve sent my husband's family into a state of panic. They hadn't expected a modern, successful woman to bite back so fiercely and walk out instantly. More than anyone else, Patricia was the calculating one. She knew perfectly well that if I filed for divorce now, our shared assets, the beautiful $1.5 million townhouse in Lincoln Park that we had closed on right before the wedding, would have to be split. My parents had provided a massive $300,000 down payment as a wedding gift, while Frank and Patricia had chipped in a mere fraction of that, $60,000. Terrified by the prospect of a messy legal battle and losing their money, Patricia deployed her most vile psychological tactic, the suburban gossip network. With her phone in hand, Patricia spent the entire afternoon calling all our mutual family friends, the ladies at her country club, the aunts, and anyone who would listen in their social circle. She maximized the acting skills of a manipulative housewife, playing the pitiful victim in a story about a disastrous new daughter-in-law. Through her fake, tearful narrative, the truth was blatantly distorted. She spread rumors that I was a spoiled, entitled princess who, banking on my high corporate salary, refused to lift a finger around the house. She claimed I screamed profanities at Brianna over laundry and disrespectfully cursed out her and Frank. The climax of her fabricated story was that I flew into a psychotic rage, grabbed a butcher knife, and threatened to murder my in-laws in cold blood, terrifying them to the point where they almost called the cops. She entirely omitted the fact that her husband hit me so hard he left a handprint on my face. The speed at which information spreads through tight-knit families is faster than a wildfire. By that evening, my phone was blowing up with messages from mutual friends. In turn, my parents were fielding awkward calls from people who had been at the wedding trying to fish for gossip. My dad had zero tolerance for such drama. When someone called, he simply stated, "Listen to me very carefully. I know my daughter. Alice would never pull a knife unless she was defending her own life. She was struck in the face by Frank so hard it left a bruise, simply because she refused to be his daughter's maid. Holding that knife was self-defense against a violent man. Patricia is spreading lies to cover up the fact that her husband is a wife-beater. The lawyers are already handling it. Do not call my house again spreading this venom. I will defend my daughter with everything I have." Then, he firmly hung up the phone. My dad's stern responses silenced the nosy relatives, who hung up awkwardly, stunned by the truth. Sitting there and listening to my dad fiercely defend my dignity, my heart swelled in my chest. I knew I had an unbreakable support system. No matter what kind of tornado Patricia tried to whip up outside, in this house, I was safe. Fueled by this security, I began planning my next steps to expose my in-laws' hypocrisy and reclaim my justice. I absolutely refused to lose this battle. The storm of gossip gradually died down after my dad's warnings. Our first dinner back home was quiet but full of love. Mom put an extra portion of roast chicken on my plate, her eyes staring sadly at the dark purple bruise on my cheek. Sitting across from me, Dad told me to rest. He said he would secure a ruthless divorce attorney first thing in the morning. Returning to my familiar childhood bedroom, I lay on the bed, feeling the absolute safety this home provided. However, with the instinct of a seasoned marketing executive used to crisis management, I knew perfectly well that in any corporate or legal battle, the truth belongs only to the one with the evidence. Words are just words. Patricia's tearful manipulation, no matter how fabricated, could complicate the narrative during the divorce settlement. If I filed now and demanded the Lincoln Park house, they would certainly use every dirty legal trick to tarnish my reputation. They would use the weapon excuse to force me to surrender that $300,000 down payment my parents made. I couldn't just sit back and let that happen. I had to set a trap for them to confess. I sat up, grabbed my iPhone, turned off Do Not Disturb, and opened the iMessage thread with Kevin. The texts he had sent earlier were still there, mostly desperate, pathetic pleas to come back to save face. I smiled to myself. Kevin was a truly naive man who avoided conflict at all costs. Did he think a few texts could erase physical violence? I hovered my thumbs over the keyboard, carefully calculating my words to craft a text that would become a legal snare. I needed Kevin to admit in writing that his mother was lying. I typed, "Kevin, be honest with me. Is your mom really calling my family and spreading rumors that I attacked your dad with a knife for no reason? Did she conveniently forget to tell everyone that Frank hit me so hard with an open hand that I have a bruise on my face, and that it happened right before that? I hit send. Almost instantly, the read receipt appeared, followed by the typing bubble. I knew Kevin had been sitting glued to his phone, desperately waiting for my reply. A minute later, his message came through. Every word was a golden ticket. Kevin replied, "Alice, I'm so sorry. My mom just panicked and was embarrassed, so she exaggerated it to your aunt. She didn't want anyone judging my dad, so she left out the part about him hitting you and only mentioned the knife. Please, try to understand. They're older and care too much about their reputation in the neighborhood. I promise I'll make her stop calling people. Just come home. We can go to couples counseling." I read his message twice. Exactly as I predicted. Kevin's desperate need to smooth things over had handed me exactly what I needed. He didn't even realize he had just given me a written, time-stamped piece of evidence against his own parents. His excuse, admitting that Frank assaulted me and confirming that Patricia was actively lying, completely exposed their toxic reality. Without hesitation, I took screenshots of the entire thread. I uploaded the photos directly to my secure Google Drive and emailed them to myself. With this weapon in hand, I finally fell asleep, saving my strength for the coming war. The next morning, the heat was already scorching by 9 a.m. The swelling on my face had gone down, but the dark, ugly bruise was impossible to hide. My mom was making pancakes in the kitchen when the doorbell rang cheerfully. Dad went to open it. Through the cracked door, I immediately recognized the silhouette of my mother-in-law. Patricia stood on the porch wearing an elegant floral summer dress. Her hair was perfectly styled, a sharp contrast to her bitter, malicious demeanor the day before. Today, a soft, sickeningly sweet smile graced her face. In her hands, she held a massive, expensive edible arrangements basket and a box of artisanal Godiva chocolates. Seeing my dad open the door, Patricia greeted him effusively, her voice dripping with fake charm, completely contradicting the venom she had spewed to my relatives. "Good morning, Richard," she beamed. "I brought a little something to check on our Alice. We had a silly little misunderstanding yesterday. You know how newlyweds bicker from stress? I came to see if I could take Alice out for lunch and bring her home so the kids can smooth everything over." I didn't let my dad answer. I pushed past him, blocking the doorway with my own body. I glared at the expensive basket and her plastic smile. My dad, having zero intention of letting her inside, crossed his arms, his voice as cold as ice. "Patricia, we will not be accepting any gifts from you," he replied flatly. "Just yesterday afternoon you were crying to my sister on the phone, accusing my daughter of being an unhinged maniac trying to murder your family. And today you stand on my porch playing the sweet mother-in-law. We really can't keep up with your acting." The smile on Patricia's face stiffened. She shifted her weight awkwardly, trying to maintain her composure. She lowered her voice, trying to backtrack. "Oh, Richard, you're taking this too seriously. Yesterday my blood pressure spiked, and in the heat of the moment, I might have said a bit too much to your sister. We are family now. Let's be understanding with each other. The kids are just working through the bumps. We should be encouraging them to stay together, not pushing them toward lawyers." At that moment, my mom marched out of the kitchen, unable to hold her tongue any longer. Pointing straight out toward the street, she yelled, "Encouraging them? Your daughter treated Alice like a maid. Your husband slapped my daughter on her second day of marriage. You stood there and allowed it, and then you actively tried to destroy her reputation. You think a fruit basket and chocolates erase an assault? Get off our property. We do not tolerate two-faced hypocrites." I stepped out onto the porch and moved toward the door. My parents naturally took a step back, allowing me to confront this terrifying woman directly. The morning sun hit my face, clearly illuminating the dark five-finger bruise on my cheek. Seeing the physical evidence of her husband's violence, Patricia looked visibly shaken, but tried to cover it up with a nervous chuckle. I looked straight into her eyes, dropping all pretenses of politeness. I articulated every word in a cold tone. "Take your chocolates and leave. Tell Frank to stay away from me. Either he meets my lawyer in court regarding the division of assets, or I file for a permanent restraining order and a massive civil suit for assault and battery. I have no patience for playing your victim housewife games." My ultimatum hit Patricia like a physical blow. She realized her plan to manipulate the narrative and save their financial investment in the townhouse had completely failed. Unable to spin another lie, her face flushed red with rage. She turned abruptly, her heels clicking aggressively on the driveway, and practically threw the heavy basket into the trunk of her Lexus. The tires squealed in haste as she sped off, taking with her the bitter humiliation of a narcissist whose mask had just been ripped off. I took a step back, closed the door, and returned to the kitchen to eat my mom's pancakes, mentally preparing myself for the next dirty trick from my husband's family. That afternoon, as I sat with my MacBook catching up on corporate emails, my phone buzzed with a message from my best friend and maid of honor. She sent me a screenshot, along with an outraged text. "Check Facebook immediately. I can't believe this." I frowned and opened the photo. It was a public post on Brianna's profile. The post tagged Kevin and was full of incredibly provocative, victim-blaming trash. Brianna wrote, "Has anyone else had to deal with a toxic, entitled sister-in-law? Imagine entering a family and immediately acting like you run the place, refusing to help with basic household chores, and then screaming and threatening your elderly in-laws when they ask for a little respect. Total bridesila from hell. Whoever marries a radical feminist like that is doomed. Pray for my brother." Beneath the post, several of Brianna's college sorority sisters and family friends chimed in supporting her, mocking me, and begging for more tea. My blood boiled. The sheer audacity of this year. Old knew no bounds. Not only did she lack any self-awareness when she ordered me to do her laundry, but she was now actively using social media to garner sympathy and paint me as the abuser. Thanks to the temperament of a marketing VP trained in PR crisis management, I knew arguing with her in the comments section would only make me look crazy. I chose a much more direct, ruthless, and legal solution. I picked up my iPhone, walked over to the window where the natural light was best, pulled my hair back, and turned on the front camera. I took a raw, close-up selfie. The high-resolution photo captured the dark purple bruising, the swelling, and the undeniable imprint of Frank's thick fingers on my cheek. The exhaustion and cold fury in my eyes were piercing. I opened Messenger and went straight to Brianna's inbox. I didn't comment on her public post. Instead, I sent that photo straight to her. Along with that hard evidence, I drafted a short, lethal message. "Listen to me carefully, Brianna. You write great fiction, but do you really want me to post this high-res photo of my face, along with a detailed police report about how your father physically assaulted his new daughter-in-law, right in the comments section under your little post? Let's see if your college friends and internet buddies think your family is traditional or just a bunch of violent white trash." I hit send. In less than 10 seconds, Brianna's profile icon dropped to the bottom of the chat, indicating she had read it. I could only imagine the color draining from that arrogant princess's face. Exactly 3 minutes later, I refreshed the Facebook page. The provocative Bridezilla post had vanished without a trace. I smiled triumphantly and put my phone down. Her childish cyberbullying had been neutralized with one undeniable fact. That night, tossing and turning in my old bed, I analyzed the arrangement of pieces on the chessboard. Kevin's text message proved his mother was lying. The photo of my bruised face silenced Brianna. However, to guarantee an absolute victory in the divorce and ensure I recovered the $300,000 my parents invested in the townhouse, I needed the ultimate weapon, something that would permanently silence Frank, the most dangerous variable in this equation. Suddenly, I had an epiphany that hit me so hard I sat straight up in bed. I had forgotten one crucial, game-changing detail. A month before the wedding, my in-laws had hired contractors to upgrade their kitchen. Worried about strangers walking through the house while wedding gifts piled up in the living room, I had personally bought and installed a small Ring indoor camera on a shelf in their living room. The camera recorded in 1080p, had crystal-clear audio, and covered the entire open-concept space from the kitchen island all the way to the front door. Because Kevin was lazy when it came to setting up tech, the master account and cloud storage were registered entirely under my email address and my credit card. I quickly grabbed my phone and texted Kevin. Even though it was past midnight, I knew he was awake playing video games. I played dumb and asked him if the living room camera was still plugged in, claiming I was looking for some misplaced jewelry and had noticed the app sent me a power loss notification last night. Kevin quickly texted back, "Oh, the camera. It was annoying my dad, so he unplugged it last night. It's not recording. Just go to sleep, Alice." Reading his message, I clenched my jaw. Kevin was lying to protect his father. He knew I wasn't there to verify it. What Kevin didn't understand was that what Frank did last night didn't matter at all. Yesterday morning, the Wi-Fi was working perfectly, which meant the HD footage of the assault had already been automatically uploaded to the cloud. He knew exactly what I was looking for, so he invented a lame excuse about a network outage. But Kevin was a terrible liar who apparently didn't understand how cloud backups worked. I opened the app on my phone, skipped the live feed, and went straight to the cloud history timeline. My heart beat faster as I scrolled back to yesterday morning. I found the video. It loaded instantly. The audio was so clear you could hear the ceiling fan running. The entire sequence played out with terrifying clarity. The argument with Brianna demanding food and laundry, Patricia's toxic instigating, Frank's deafening screams, and the sickening, brutal sound of the slap striking my face. Even the metallic clatter of the knife being tossed onto the granite counter echoed perfectly. The phantom pain on my cheek flared up again, but the thrill of victory quickly overshadowed it. I immediately downloaded the entire 10-minute clip to my iPhone, backed it up on my laptop, and emailed it to my dad's lawyer. With this video, unconditional victory was in my hands. 3 days after I left, Kevin's family began to crack under the pressure of my terrifying silence. Late in the afternoon, my phone rang. Frank's name appeared on the caller ID. I answered without even saying hello. On the other end, Frank's deep, condescending voice sounded, still dripping with unwarranted authority. "Tell your father to cancel all his plans," he growled. "Tomorrow afternoon, Patricia and I are coming over to your house to sort out this mess. We don't have time to wait around while you throw a tantrum. You made your point. Now it's time to act like adults." I laughed inwardly. He still thought he held the cards. He actually believed acting tough would make my family back down. I answered coldly, my voice uncompromising. "The doors to my parents' house are closed to you. If you want to negotiate the divorce settlement and the division of the townhouse, we will meet on neutral ground. Tomorrow at 2:00 p.m. We have a private conference room reserved at the Four Seasons downtown. If you don't show up, my lawyer will file the divorce papers straight with the court, along with a devastating civil suit for assault and battery that will become public record." Before Frank could stammer a reply, I hung up. The next afternoon, my parents, my lawyer, and I arrived at the luxury Four Seasons hotel 10 minutes early. We had secured a private boardroom, providing a stark contrast to the ugly reality that was about to be exposed. We sat on one side of a long mahogany conference table. At the head of the room was a large flat-screen TV used for business presentations. At exactly 2 p.m., Frank, Patricia, and Kevin walked in. Frank had a stern expression, trying to project dominance. Patricia nervously scanned the opulent interior, and Kevin walked silently behind them. His shoulders slumped, unable to look at me. As they sat down across from us, Frank cleared his throat, preparing to deliver a condescending lecture. I didn't even let him take a breath. I stood up, plugged the HDMI cable into my laptop, and mirrored my screen to the large TV. I looked directly at Frank. "Before you say a single word about family values, please watch this," I said cleanly. "It will save my lawyer a lot of billable hours." I pressed play. Immediately, the crystal-clear footage from their living room appeared on the massive screen. Brianna's whining, Patricia's instigating, and Frank's roaring echoed through the elegant room. And then, that undeniable moment where Frank swings his massive hand and strikes me, replayed in high definition. The video ended with the sound of the knife hitting the counter. A suffocating, breathless silence fell over the room. I unplugged the cable and closed my laptop. Frank's choreographed dominance completely evaporated. The blood drained from his face, making him look old and terrified. His thick hands, resting on the table, began to tremble. Patricia's jaw dropped. She stared blankly at the black TV screen, hyperventilating. Kevin hid his face in his hands, completely broken. The raw, undeniable truth had shattered their fake reality. Control over the negotiations now belonged entirely to me. The silence was heavy. Frank, the big tough guy, was now cowering and shaking, terrified of the legal consequences of his assault. Captured on tape, Patricia kept wiping her sweaty forehead with a tissue, looking exactly like a criminal caught red-handed. I didn't give them a moment to catch their breath. I slid a printed packet of documents across the polished table toward Patricia. The first page was a high-quality printout of Kevin's text message, in which he admitted his mother fabricated the knife story to cover up the slap. I crossed my arms, my voice filling the room. The video proves the assault. The text message proves the coordinated effort to defame my reputation. My legal team has a copy of everything. So, Here's how this ends. Tomorrow, I file for divorce and take full legal action unless you meet my terms today. Hearing the words divorce and legal action, Patricia flinched. She leaned forward, desperately grasping at straws. Alice, sweetie, this can all be fixed. We were wrong. Frank is so sorry. Please, let's not go to court. A divorce after less than a week will ruin us. The townhouse, the legal fees, it's too complicated. I smiled bitterly. Even now, she only cared about the real estate and the money. I signaled my lawyer, who slid the final financial documents toward them. I looked straight at Patricia, laying out the math. The division of assets is not complicated at all. We bought that townhouse for $1.5 million. My parents put down $300,000 in cash. You and Frank chipped in a measly $60,000. You don't have $300,000 to buy me out. Therefore, I demand that you take your $60,000 back and forfeit all rights to the property. Kevin, you will sign a quitclaim deed transferring the title entirely to me. We keep our money, you get your little deposit back, and we dissolve this marriage. Frank's head snapped up, the veins in his neck bulging as greed momentarily overcame his fear. Are you out of your mind? The Chicago real estate market is booming. That place will be worth $2 million in a few years. You're forcing us to walk away with nothing. No profit at all. I slammed my hand onto the conference table, pinning him with my gaze. Frank, you committed assault and battery. Your wife committed criminal defamation. My lawyer already has a civil suit drafted for assault and intentional infliction of emotional distress, which will bankrupt your retirement savings. If we go to court, this recording becomes public record. It will inevitably end up on local news blogs, irreversibly destroying whatever shred of reputation you have left. You can take your $60,000 and sign that paper in front of a notary today, or we will see each other in criminal and civil court, where absolute financial and social ruin awaits you. The choice is yours. Kevin, who had sat mute the entire time, finally spoke. He looked at his father, his voice tinged with despair. Dad, just take the money and let it go. You hit her on camera. We have no defense. I'll sign the quitclaim to Alice right now. Kevin's cowardice had finally worked in my favor. The air left Frank like a punctured tire. He slumped his shoulders in defeat, nodding his head in silent consent. Without a word, Kevin took the expensive pen and signed the preliminary documents for the notary. Before ending the meeting, I issued one final condition. I demanded that Brianna, the catalyst for all of this, personally post a public apology on her Facebook and Instagram, admitting she lied about me, and that it remain pinned to her profile for 30 days. If she deleted it, the video would be sent straight to her college alumni groups. Patricia ground her teeth, swallowing her pride, and swore she would make Brianna post it that very night. The negotiations ended in my flawless victory. I walked out of the Four Seasons. The hot summer sun warmed my face, and I felt as if someone had cut a massive chain tightening around my neck. The title transfer was signed quickly and quietly. Terrified by the video evidence, my in-laws didn't dare contest a single clause. 60 days later, at the first hearing, the judge granted a no-fault divorce based on the settlement. They received their $60,000 check, and the deed to the luxury townhouse was transferred entirely to my name. Brianna, humiliated, had to post a groveling apology, clearing my name in front of all our mutual friends, after which she completely locked down her profiles. I was officially a free, independent woman. I packed up my things, hugged my parents, and moved into my beautiful new home. During my first weekend in the new place, the silence was incredible. I threw open the patio doors to let in the fresh air, wanting to banish the last remnants of energy from that disastrous relationship. The first thing I did was tackle a few boxes of Kevin's belongings that he had managed to move over before the wedding. He was so depressed and ashamed that he abandoned them completely, texting me to just throw it all in the trash. I happily obliged, unceremoniously shoving his computer gear, clothes, and knickknacks into heavy-duty trash bags. While emptying the top shelf in the master bedroom closet, I noticed an old, heavy metal lockbox and a battered cardboard box shoved deep into the corner. Initially, I was going to throw it all out, but my natural curiosity made me pause. I opened the cardboard box first. Inside were some old action figures from the 90s, some vintage comic books, and a faded leather photo album. I opened the album. Most of the photos were faded Polaroids of a little boy. I instantly recognized Kevin's awkward childhood smile. I turned the page, and my eyes fell on a photo tucked into a plastic sleeve. The photograph showed a 7-year-old Kevin standing next to a tall man in a sharp 90s suit. The man had a strong jawline, sharp eyes, and a confident smile. What startled me was the striking resemblance of this man to Kevin. The resemblance was uncanny, far greater than Kevin ever resembled Frank. I pulled the photo out and flipped it over. Written in faded blue ink was, Victor and Kevin, 1998. I frowned. That man was definitely not Frank. Who was Victor? Why was this hidden at the very bottom of Kevin's old things? Driven by a hunch, I picked up the heavy metal lockbox. It wasn't padlocked. I pried open the latch and looked inside. There was no money, but there was a thick, yellowed envelope sealed with tape that was crumbling from age. Carefully, I tore it open and pulled out an old piece of paper, covered in hasty, trembling handwriting. I sat on the oak floor, straining my eyes to read the letter, which carried a dark secret from 20 years ago. The letter began with a desperate plea. Frank, my brother. By the time you read this letter, the feds will have probably already picked me up. My businesses and investments went up in smoke, and I'm looking at serious time in federal prison. My only regret is getting involved with the wrong investors and leaving my boy behind. I held my breath. The author of the letter was Victor, Frank's older brother. I vaguely recalled some hushed whispers at the wedding about an uncle who went to prison in the late 90s for white-collar crimes or fraud. So, the man in the photo was Victor. I kept reading, my pulse quickening. They've frozen my corporate accounts, but they didn't manage to seize everything. I managed to hide a massive sum. In the safe buried under the old oak tree in your backyard, there is $1 million in cash and gold coins. This is my life savings, meant to secure Kevin's future. His mother has already passed, and I am going away for a long time. Kevin is only 7 years old. Frank, treat this as a trust for his future. You are his legal guardian. I am begging you to manage this money properly. Send him to a good college, buy him his first house, and make sure he never wants for anything. As I read the final sentence, the paper trembled in my hand. A chill ran down my spine. The curtain had been torn away. Kevin wasn't Frank and Patricia's biological son. He was their nephew, the orphaned son of Uncle Victor. But the nightmare didn't end there. $1 million in hard currency and gold in 1998 was a massive fortune. Invested wisely over 20 years, that money would be worth millions today. Victor had entrusted his son's entire future to his brother. But what did Frank and Patricia do? All the red flags suddenly connected into one cohesive picture. Kevin had inherited a giant fortune, yet he grew up wearing secondhand clothes and took out student loans for college. When I was dating him, I saw how Frank and Patricia constantly guilt-tripped him, siphoning off his IT salary to pay for their vacations, claiming he owed them for taking him in. Meanwhile, for Brianna, their biological daughter, they bought a brand new Mercedes straight off the lot, paid her private college tuition in full, and bankrolled her luxurious lifestyle. They constantly used psychological manipulation. We gave up our own lives to raise you to turn Kevin into their obedient ATM. I realized with terrifying clarity, Frank and Patricia dug up that money and stole every last cent. They used Victor's hidden wealth to elevate their own standard of living and spoil Brianna, all while psychologically abusing the rightful heir and forcing him to pay them back for his own upbringing. Even though our marriage was over and despite Kevin's cowardice, my sense of justice wouldn't let me walk away from this. I couldn't just leave knowing he was living a lie, manipulated by the monsters who stole his life. I decided to hand this letter to Kevin and wake him up from his nightmare. The next morning, I texted Kevin, asking him to meet me at a trendy coffee shop in the West Loop. Kevin showed up right on time. It was the first time we had seen each other since the divorce was finalized in court. He looked completely wrecked. He had lost weight, hadn't shaved, and was wearing a wrinkled hoodie. He looked absolutely defeated by life. He sat across from me, avoiding my eyes out of shame. "Why did you want to meet?" he asked quietly. "I'm renting a shoebox apartment out in the suburbs now. Frank and Patricia won't stop screaming at me for losing the townhouse." I didn't answer right away. I reached into my bag, pulled out the metal lockbox, and placed it right on the table. Kevin looked at it in confusion. "I haven't seen that since I was a kid. It was just an empty tin where I kept my Pokemon and baseball cards. Why did you bring this?" I looked deep into his eyes, my voice carrying the weight of the truth. "Open it. It has a false bottom. I found something you have a right to see. A truth that the people calling themselves your parents have been hiding from you for over 20 years. Seeing my serious expression, Kevin clumsily pried up the bottom of the box, removed the rusted metal insert, and found the photo and the yellowed envelope I had placed back inside. He pulled out the photo of himself and Victor. His hands froze, his pupils dilating. It was clear his memories of this man had been deliberately erased and manipulated. Trembling, Kevin pulled out the letter. The coffee shop bustled in the background, but at our table, the silence was deafening. His eyes scanned the words of his biological father. When he read the part about the massive fortune and the plea for Frank to raise him with that money, Kevin's entire body went rigid. Tears spilled from his eyes, dripping onto the old paper. He clutched his head. A choked, agonizing sob escaped his throat. The illusion of the loving family he had revered and feared, his entire life shattered into a million sharp pieces. I sat quietly, allowing him to process the monumental betrayal. After a few minutes, I leaned forward, pulling him back to reality with a hard voice. "Do you understand now why they always demanded your paycheck?" I said clearly. "Do you see now where Frank and Patricia got the money for Brianna's luxury cars and college tuition, while you drowned in student debt? You owe those people absolutely nothing. They are not your parents. They are fraudsters who stole your inheritance. Are you going to keep being their punching bag? Or are you going to stand up and demand justice for what they did to you and your real father?" My words hit him like a defibrillator. Kevin wiped his face. In his eyes, which had always been so passive and cowardly, I saw a terrifying spark of pure, unadulterated rage ignite. He clenched his jaw, gripping the letter tightly. He was finally awake. Leaving the coffee shop, Kevin became a different man. He took an indefinite leave of absence from his IT firm and immediately hired a ruthless corporate and financial litigator in downtown Chicago. Armed with the letter and the photo, he told the lawyer the whole story. The lawyer formulated a plan. The statute of limitations for simple theft is tricky, but if they could prove years of ongoing fraud, embezzlement, and breach of fiduciary duty regarding assets entrusted for a minor, they had a case. However, they needed a direct admission of guilt. That very evening, Kevin drove to the home of his abusers. Before stepping through the door, he opened the voice memos app on his phone, hit record, and slipped the device securely into his breast pocket. As soon as he walked in, Patricia, who was watching TV, scoffed, assuming Kevin had returned to beg for financial help. She immediately went on the attack. "What do you want?" she sneered. "You let your crazy ex-wife steal our investment, and now you come crawling back." "We don't have the money to bail you out, Kevin." Frank spun around in his recliner, glaring at him. Kevin didn't even blink. He calmly walked over and stood over them. His cold eyes scanned the faces of the monsters who had played him for a fool. He pulled the yellowed letter from his pocket and threw it onto the coffee table. "I came to ask you one question," he said in a terrifyingly calm voice. "In 1998, my father Victor went to federal prison. He wrote to you that he buried $1 million in cash and gold in the backyard for my future. Where is my money, Frank?" The atmosphere in the room imploded. Patricia gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. Frank's face turned as white as paper as he stared at his brother's familiar handwriting. Total panic washed over them. They never imagined this letter existed. Patricia started stammering, instantly reverting to her victim routine. "What money? Victor went to jail and dumped you on us? Do you have any idea how much it costs to raise a boy? Food, clothes, doctors. Whatever was in that safe, we spent on keeping a roof over your head. You owe us." Frank, trying to regain control, stood up and roared. "You ungrateful little punk. We raised you. That money was compensation for us taking you in. Otherwise, we would have thrown you into the foster system. Are you trying to blackmail us with some old piece of paper from 20 years ago?" Their arrogant, defensive shouting was an automatic admission of digging up the money and spending it on themselves, and the phone in Kevin's pocket recorded every single syllable in crystal-clear audio. Kevin snatched the letter off the table, looking at them with pure disgust. "You stole my father's money to fund luxuries in college for Brianna and your own comfortable lives. And then you psychologically abused me, making me pay you back for my own upbringing," he hissed through his teeth. "You make me sick. You will be dealing with my lawyer." He turned on his heel and walked out of the house, leaving Frank and Patricia screaming in terror behind him. The next morning, Kevin handed the recording over to his litigator. A massive civil lawsuit was filed in federal court for fraud, breach of fiduciary duty to a minor, unjust enrichment, and embezzlement. Simultaneously, the lawyer filed injunctions to freeze Frank and Patricia's bank accounts, their retirement funds, and placed a lien on their property to prevent them from hiding assets during the investigation. The legal hammer of justice was about to crush the family. The trial concluded a year later. I attended one of the hearings to provide supporting testimony about finding the letter, but mostly, I went to watch karma at work. The courtroom was imposing and austere. At the defense table, Frank and Patricia looked completely destroyed. The stress of the trial and their frozen assets had aged them a decade. Frank's hair had gone completely gray, and his arrogant posture had given way to an anxious slouch. Patricia wore a cheap, faded blouse, stripped of her designer clothes and fake charm. In the gallery, Brianna wept quietly. Because her parents' accounts were frozen, her luxury car had been repossessed, and having no job, her life as a spoiled princess had come to a brutal end. Kevin sat with his legal team. He looked sharp in a tailored suit. He was composed and unwavering. The evidence presented by his side was devastating. The lawyer played the audio recording of Frank and Patricia explicitly admitting to taking the fortune. But the nail in the coffin was the forensic accounting. The lawyer had obtained unsealed bank records from the late 90s. It was proven that right after Victor's arrest, Frank began making massive cash deposits and exchanging gold coins at local jewelers. They used those exact funds to pay off the mortgage on their own house, buy land outside the city, and set up a massive trust fund for Brianna. They didn't spend that money raising Kevin. They used it to enrich themselves while treating Kevin like a burden. The judge's ruling was severe and merciless. Frank and Patricia were found liable for egregious fraud and the embezzlement of entrusted funds. Because the stolen assets would have grown significantly if invested properly over 20 years, the judge ordered massive restitution. The court ordered the foreclosure and liquidation of all their assets, their house, their life savings, and the funds secured in Brianna's accounts totaling over $4 million with interest to be paid directly to Kevin. Patricia collapsed onto the defense table, sobbing. Frank sat paralyzed, staring at the floor as the bailiff handed them the asset seizure paperwork. Brianna wailed in the gallery, realizing she was now completely broke and homeless. Greed had finally eaten them alive. I walked out of the courthouse, took a deep breath of the crisp Chicago air, and felt an incredible sense of relief and closure. A few weeks later, Kevin asked for one last meeting by the Riverwalk. When I arrived, I was amazed by his transformation. He looked healthy, vibrant, and completely unburdened. He was wearing a simple t-shirt, and his face was relaxed and smiling. We sat on a stone wall, looking out at the shimmering water of the river. "I wanted to thank you, Alice," Kevin said sincerely. "If you hadn't stood up to Frank and found that letter, I would have spent my whole life as their slave. You saved me. With the settlement money, I started a foundation in my real dad's name to help kids from tough homes who have parents in prison. And the rest is funding my new life." I smiled, genuinely happy for him. "And what's the next step? Going back to coding?" Kevin shook his head, a wide smile spreading across his face. "I'm moving to San Diego. I found Victor's old journals. He always wanted to live by the ocean. I'm buying an old beachfront property there and opening a surf school and paddleboard rental shop. I'm done with monitors and corporate offices. I'm going to live near the ocean." Looking at Kevin, I realized the trauma hadn't destroyed him. It had forged him into an independent man. Our disastrous, short-lived marriage was simply the chaotic catalyst we both needed to break free and find our true paths. I hugged him goodbye. "Safe travels to the coast, Kevin. Leave all the darkness behind. You deserve peace." Kevin walked away, heading toward his new future, and I focused entirely on my own. After closing the door on the past, I poured all my energy into my career. I secured massive marketing contracts and, within 2 years, was promoted to VP of Communications. Financial success gave me the ultimate freedom of an independent woman. To balance the stressful corporate world, I started collecting modern art. One Friday evening, I attended a gallery opening in downtown Chicago. I was wearing a sleek black dress. Sipping champagne, I admired a massive abstract painting depicting a storm crashing over the ocean. Those turbulent brushstrokes are very intense, but look at the top right corner. The light is already breaking through the clouds. A warm voice suddenly said beside me. I turned around. Standing there was a tall, incredibly handsome man exuding a calm, kind aura. He introduced himself as Matthew, a lead architect designing luxury, eco-friendly homes that blend with nature. That chance meeting sparked a beautiful new chapter. Matthew was neither loud nor aggressive. He was patient, warm, and deeply empathetic. We started dating, spending weekends eating from food trucks along the lakefront, hiking in the state parks, and talking for hours. When I finally told Matthew about my chaotic first marriage, about Frank's slap, the chef's knife, and the intense legal battle, Matthew didn't judge me. He didn't call me hysterical. He simply reached across the table, took my hand, and looked me straight in the eyes. A woman who refuses to be a victim and fights to protect her dignity is exactly the kind of woman I respect, he said softly. I'm sorry you went through hell, but I'm glad it forged the incredibly strong woman sitting across from me right now. I love everything about you, Alice. Our love grew from a foundation of absolute mutual respect. A year later, in the beautiful, custom-designed home he built for us in the suburbs, Matthew got down on one knee and proposed. I said yes with tears of pure happiness in my eyes. 5 years passed in the blink of an eye. We built a wonderful life, which became even more perfect with the birth of our daughter, Hannah. One weekend, I took Hannah to a trendy outdoor food hall in the city. As Hannah happily ate her ice cream, I noticed a frail, ragged older woman digging through the public recycling bins behind the restaurants, collecting beer cans and bottles. When the woman turned her head, my heart skipped a beat. It was Patricia. After losing everything to Kevin's lawsuit and facing tax debts for money laundering, Frank and Patricia had been left destitute. Following a stroke, Frank was put into the cheapest state-run nursing home on the outskirts of the city, and Patricia lived in a rundown rented room, trying to survive on whatever she could scavenge from dumpsters. Patricia's eyes met mine. The arrogant woman who had once demanded I be her maid froze. Complete humiliation washed over her face. She dropped her plastic bags full of cans, turned, and practically sprinted away to hide in an alleyway. I didn't smile. I took no satisfaction in it. I simply hugged my daughter a little tighter. Karma is a flawless accountant. Every debt eventually comes due. A few months later, I enrolled Hannah in a painting class at a nearby community arts center. Waiting in the hallway, I noticed the instructor's assistant, wearing a paint-stained apron and carrying brushes. It was Brianna. Without her trust fund and designer clothes, Brianna looked exhausted, but notably subdued. She had to drop out of her private college and take a minimum-wage job just to survive. Brianna saw me. She hesitated for a second, then walked over to me with a timid but genuine smile. "Hi, Alice," she said softly. "You have a beautiful daughter." The venom of the past had been entirely burned away by reality. I answered her just as warmly. "Hi, Brianna. Do you like working here?" "Yes," she replied with humility. "It's hard work, but I enrolled in night classes and I'm earning my own money to pay for it. It gives me a nice sense of satisfaction. And Alice, I'm truly sorry for how I treated you back then." I nodded, appreciating her growth. Life had forcefully dragged her out of her spoiled bubble, and she was slowly building an honest life. I wished her all the best. And I meant it sincerely. That summer, we flew to Maui for a family vacation. Sitting on the Golden Beach and watching Matthew teach Hannah how to build sandcastles, I felt a deep sense of harmony. My phone buzzed. An Instagram notification. It was a message from Kevin. He sent a photo of himself standing in front of a thriving water sports rental shop in San Diego. He was deeply tanned. He was smiling broadly, his arm wrapped around a beautiful woman holding a newborn baby boy. His message read, "Hey Alice, we just welcomed our son into the world. The ocean really does heal everything. I hope everything is going wonderfully for you and your family." I showed the photo to Matthew. He smiled, took my phone, and typed back, "Huge congratulations from our family to yours. Wishing you all the most beautiful things in life." I rested my head on Matthew's shoulder, watching the waves crash against the shore. In silence, I gave thanks for the painful storms of my past. I had refused to be a victim, and because of that, I had forged a life for myself full of true love, light, and absolute peace.